April 8, 1943. At an altitude of 27,000 feet above Caen, France. The oxygen mask did little to conceal Oberleutnant Ralph Hermikin's grin, as he observed the awkward shapes slowly ascending toward him through the clear canopy of his Focke-Wulf 190A5. The seasoned ace from Jagdgeschwader, age 26, scrutinized the American fighters making their first appearance in the skies over occupied Europe. "Our adversaries have sent us flying milk bottles," he communicated to his wingman, unable to hold back his amusement at the sight of the large Republic P-47 Thunderbolt struggling to gain height. Below him, 16 P-47C Thunderbolts from the 4th Fighter Group clumsily climbed in a tight formation. Their 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engines straining against their 7-ton weight. TO German pilots who were used to the agile Spitfires and quick Soviet fighters, these bulky American planes seemed almost laughable. With barrel-shaped bodies crowned by greenhouse canopies, wings that looked too small for their hefty frames, and propellers that were larger than anything in the Luftwaffe fleet, the aircraft appeared comical. What Hermikin did not realize, and what none of the German pilots circling overhead like predators could have anticipated, was that they were witnessing the introduction of a weapon that would systematically dismantle the Luftwaffe's fighter force in just a year and a half. These flying milk containers would evolve from objects of mockery into tools of dread, their 8-2 Browning machine guns becoming the most dreaded noise in German skies. The potential for destruction was already embedded in those wide wings. With 3,400 rounds of ammunition and a combined firing rate of 6,000 rounds per minute, they possessed enough concentrated firepower to split a Messerschmitt in two in under 2 seconds. The change began that April morning when Major Donald Bliley, the leader of the 335th Fighter Squadron, noticed the German formation gearing up to attack. A former Eagle Squadron pilot who had transitioned from RAF Spitfires only a few weeks before, he recognized what his men had yet to understand. Surviving in the P-47 meant letting go of their previous notions about air combat. The Thunderbolt signified a significant shift away from traditional fighter design principles. While the Germans had focused on lightweight interceptors fine-tuned for climbing and maneuverability, Republic Aviation developed something entirely different. A high-altitude behemoth that utilized mass, power, and firepower to change the game of aerial warfare. Among the 56 American pilots scattered across the French sky that day were individuals who would later achieve legendary status, future aces whose names would instill fear in the hearts of the Luftwaffe. However, on April 8, 1943, they were inexperienced pilots in an untamed aircraft, up against the most seasoned fighter force globally. The Germans had been engaged in combat continuously since 1939, with veterans from battles in Poland, France, Britain, and Russia. The Americans, in contrast, had 0 days of combat experience. This narrative illustrates how industrial strategy overcame tactical skill, how the combination of quantity and quality led to unmatched dominance, and how the laughter of German pilots transformed into horror as they learned the destructive power of synchronized Browning machine guns at a distance of 400 yards. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt originated from a crisis in June 1940. As German aircraft dominated the skies over France, Alexander Kartveli, the chief designer of Republic Aviation born in Georgia, received urgent requirements from the U.S. Army Air Corps. They needed a high-altitude interceptor that could compete with the finest of the Luftwaffe. However, what Kartveli created was an impressive machine that changed the concept of capability. "It will be a giant," Kartveli confessed to his design team. "But it will be a giant with proper proportions." The XP-47B prototype, which made its first flight on May 6, 1941, amazed everyone who witnessed it. Weighing in at 9,900 pounds empty, it was 65% heavier than the P-43 Lancer, its predecessor. Its enormous turbo-supercharger system, featuring intricate ductwork running through the rear fuselage, gave it a somewhat bulging appearance. Test pilots encountering it for the first time consistently raised the same inquiry. This thing actually flies? Not only did it take to the skies, it performed better than anything else at high altitudes. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine, a radial engine with 18 cylinders generating 2,000 horsepower, could deliver full power at 27,000 feet while German aircraft struggled to breathe. The turbo-supercharger, utilizing exhaust gases, provided the performance of sea level in the stratosphere, where traditional superchargers couldn't function efficiently. Major Hubert Hub Zaka, commanding the 56th Fighter Group training in Bridgeport, Connecticut, initially held a strong dislike for the aircraft. His squadron experienced the loss of 18 pilots and 41 planes during training mishaps from September 1942 to January 1943. More American lives were taken by the P-47 during training than by Germans in the initial months of battle. It would ground loop when landing, torque roll during takeoff, and dive so energetically that pilots realized compressibility, with controls locking up as shock waves appeared on the wings. However, those who learned to handle it found something remarkable. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, a rural youth from Oklahoma who would later achieve fame as one of America's leading aces with 27 victories, recalled his first flight. It felt like being tied to a train. The force was astonishing. You didn't fly it, you aimed it. The first battles in April and May 1943 confirmed all German biases. The P-47s were outmatched by the Fowler-Wolf 190s in turns, struggled against the Messerschmitt 109s in climbing, and couldn't compete in nimbleness at mid-altitudes. Luftwaffe pilots quickly adapted their strategies to take advantage of these flaws, attacking from below, where the hefty Thunderbolts had difficulty, and forcing dogfights where agility was more important than firepower. Hutchman Isef Pips Priller, the leader of Yakashvata 26, sent a report to headquarters after his initial encounter. The new American fighter is easy prey. It operates like a truck, turns like a freight train, and climbs like an overweight cow. Our pilots refer to them as Indiana, plump targets pretending to be warriors. The data seems to back up German confidence. During their first month of operations, the American fighter units lost 14 Thunderbolts while only achieving 3 confirmed kills against the Germans. The RAF, monitoring from their Spitfire units, quietly suggested that the Americans might want to reconsider their aircraft choice. British pilots jokingly stated that the best way to evade an AP-47 was to unbuckle and run around the spacious cockpit. Yet, something unusual was occurring in those early skirmishes that German intelligence overlooked. The P-47s that were shot down had endured immense damage before succumbing. One plane returned from a May 4th mission with 21 bullet holes from cannons and over 100 hits from machine guns. Damage that would have obliterated a Messerschmitt or Spitfire. The large radial engine, lacking delicate coolant systems, shrugged off impacts that would have halted a liquid-cooled fighter in its tracks. More importantly, when P-47s successfully engaged their targets, the outcome was devastating. The Thunderbolts' armament created a zone of annihilation that German pilots had never faced before. Unlike the rifle-caliber arms of earlier war fighters or cannons with limited rounds, the American fighter could sustain fire for over 30 seconds, which felt like an eternity in air combat. The incident that would start to alter German views took place on June 26, 1943, above Lazo, France. It involved 2nd Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson from the 61st Fighter Squadron, and an encounter that would become famed on both sides of the war. Johnson's group of 48 P-47s was returning from an escort mission when they were ambushed by 16 Focke-Wulf 190s from 2/Groups 26, commanded by Hetman Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland, the younger sibling of the notable Adolf Galland. The Germans executed their strike flawlessly, descending from the sun with a significant speed advantage. Johnson's Thunderbolt, positioned at the back of the formation, was caught in the fire from multiple attackers, suffering severe damage in the initial moments of battle. 20mm cannon rounds exploded around his plane. The canopy broke apart, hydraulic fluid sprayed into the cockpit, the engine cowling was ripped off, and flames erupted behind the instrument panel. Injured in the nose and leg by shrapnel and bullet fragments, Johnson attempted to eject, but found the canopy was stuck. A 20mm shell had detonated in the canopy rail, sealing it shut. He was ensnared in a failing aircraft at an altitude of 27,000 feet. What transpired next defied all expectations regarding damage tolerance in combat. Even with no visibility ahead through the oil-smeared windscreen, an engine that was barely functioning and shaking violently, and controls that only responded occasionally, Johnson managed to stabilize the aircraft and direct it towards England. The P-47 continued to fly despite the damage that would have caused any other fighter to break apart in the air. Then the situation worsened. A solitary Focke-Wulf 190, piloted by an unidentified aviator from 2/JG-26, spotted the impaired Thunderbolt struggling toward the channel at under 170 miles per hour. Historical analysis has never definitively traced this pilot, although several names have been suggested based on German reports from that day. What ensued was one of the most remarkable encounters in the history of aerial combat. The German pilot positioned himself behind Johnson's P-47 and opened fire with his 20mm cannon and two 13mm machine guns. Johnson, unable to dodge the assault, could only cower behind his armor plate and hope for survival. The Thunderbolt took on the full load of cannon ammunition. The German then shifted his position and fired once more, this time relying solely on his machine guns. With the cannon shots used up, the German pilot came alongside, looking in shock at the damaged aircraft. Johnson clearly saw his youthful, blonde face, which transformed from confidence to confusion, and then to something that resembled fear. The German pilot adjusted his position again and fired all his remaining machine gun bullets into the Thunderbolt. Yet it continued to fly. He came alongside once more, shook his head in disbelief, gave a casual salute and pulled away, likely out of bullets. Johnson's P-47 touched down at Manston while its engine struggled on the runway. The crew chief stopped counting the bullet holes after hitting 200.1 cannon shell had gone off just inches from Johnson's head, while another exploded against the protective armor behind his seat. The engine received direct hits, and the control cables were partially cut. 3 out of the 4 main longerons, which form the structural core of the fuselage, were pierced by bullets. Nevertheless, the plane managed to bring him back home. The survival of Johnson's aircraft shocked both air forces. American engineers examining the remains understood they had misjudged their own design. German intelligence, which received combat updates from the second section of Jagdgeschwader 26, initially found it hard to believe NO aircraft could withstand that level of damage, but multiple pilots' accounts confirmed what seemed impossible. The Thunderbolt had endured all that the Luftwaffe's finest fighter could unleash and remained intact. By July 1943, American pilots began to realize the true advantages of the P-47. Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Zena, commanding the 56th Fighter Group, uncovered the secret through harsh experience. Avoid turning against them. Don't climb when low. Use your weight. Use your power. Use your guns. The Thunderbolt's significant weight, first viewed as a drawback, turned into an asset. Nothing could catch it in a dive. From 30,000 feet, a P-47 could hit speeds of 550 miles per hour, surpassing any German fighter's capabilities, even in a steep dive. This velocity could be transformed into altitude during a zoom climb, leaving pursuing fighters in the dust. Captain Walker Bard Mahurin, who later became one of the first American aces in Europe, created a strategy known as the boom and zoom tactic, though pilots referred to it as the Thunderbolt turkey shoot. Rather than taking part in conventional dogfights, formations of P-47s would ascend to 30,000 feet, beyond the operational limits of German fighters. When Luftwaffe planes were spotted below, the Thunderbolts would flip upside down and dive, achieving speeds that made it impossible for the Germans to aim effectively. At the end of these dives, the American heavy machine guns would open fire. German pilots who managed to survive described it as confronting a wall of lead, with the combined firepower forming an unbreakable area of devastation. Planes caught in this coming together of forces didn't merely go down, they were obliterated. The real demonstration of U.S. military strength occurred during the dual assault on Schweinfurt and Regensburg on August 17, 1943, which was the farthest into Germany reached up to that moment. This operation would highlight the P-47's weaknesses, such as its range even with external fuel tanks, alongside its frightening effectiveness when used correctly. Major David Schilling, who commanded the 62nd Fighter Squadron, came across a group of Messerschmitt 110 interceptor planes preparing to attack B-17s with their powerful cannons and rocket weaponry. The German twin-engine fighters, well-equipped yet less agile, served as the Luftwaffe's specialized enemies for bombers. Schilling's formation of 4 Thunderbolts dove into their attack from an altitude of 28,000 feet. Uniffizier Heinrich Roth, a surviving gunner from one of the Mi-10s, later recounted during AP interrogation that the American fighters descended like thunderbolts from above. I started firing at 800 meters. I scored good shots. I witnessed them hit the wing of the fighter. The P-47 remained steady. Then he opened fire. The aircraft in front of us just shattered. Not merely shot down but obliterated. Wings detached from the body, tail cut off. The crew area turned into fragments of metal. In just 2 seconds, a 110 was erased. 8 Messerschmitt 110s were eliminated in under a minute. The German aviators had never faced firepower of such intensity. Each P-47 was equipped with 425 rounds per gun, totaling 3,400 rounds, which amounted to nearly 900 pounds. At the point where the fire converged, usually set at 300 yards, the trajectories of all 8 guns met in an area of about 6 feet in diameter. Any target within that vicinity endured 100 projectiles every second, with each traveling at 2,900 feet per second. The ammunition demonstrated the impressive production capabilities of American industry. While German aircraft dealt with inadequate cannon ammunition, typically ranging from 120 to 200 rounds for a 20 mm gun, American pilots could sustain firing for over 30 seconds. The usual combat load featured a mix of armor-piercing incendiary tracer, and standard ball rounds, arranged to both destroy targets and ignite them. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabby Gabreski, who would later become the leading American ace in Europe with 28 kills, spoke about the impact. When the 8 guns hit the target, it didn't just drop, it would explode. I witnessed a 109 literally split in two, with the tail falling one way and the nose plus wings another. The pilot had no idea what struck him. By September 1943, the Luftwaffe was facing another frightening truth regarding the P-47. Its capabilities increased significantly at higher altitudes, while German fighters struggled. The turbo-supercharged double Wasp engine continued to deliver its full power up to 30,000 feet. In contrast, German fighters relying on single-stage or two-stage mechanical superchargers saw a severe decline in performance above 25,000 feet. Obliterated Hans Philipp, one of Germany's most accomplished pilots with 206 kills, realized this harsh fact on October 8, 1943, in a deadly encounter. While leading Jagdgeschwader 1 against AB-17 formation at 28,000 feet over Bremen, Philipp found his Focke-Wulf 190A6 sluggish and unresponsive in the thin atmosphere. The BMW 801 engine, effective at medium elevations, struggled for oxygen nearly 6 miles above sea level. As P-47s from the 56th Fighter Group swooped down on his group from 32,000 feet, the German fighters became easy targets. Robert Johnson, an experienced combat pilot en route to ace status, was at 31,000 feet when he noticed Philipp's distinct Focke-Wulf with its intricate nose art. Johnson's combat summary was precise, initiating fire at 300 yards with a 30 degrees angle. He noted impacts along the entire fuselage. The enemy aircraft exploded. No parachute was seen. Philipp's demise reverberated throughout the Luftwaffe. If one of their top pilots, who had survived over 500 combat missions on both Eastern and Western fronts, could not survive against the Thunderbolts, what hope did average pilots possess? The German High Command swiftly launched an investigation into the capabilities of the P-47. That the findings presented to Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring in November 1943 were alarming. The Thunderbolt had a service ceiling that exceeded 42,000 feet, far beyond any German fighter's reach. Its dive speed approached the speed of sound. The armor featured included a 3/8-inch steel plate behind the pilot, a 1/2-inch bulletproof glass windscreen, and armored deflection plates surrounding the engine. Most alarmingly, its tough design enabled it to endure damage that would incapacitate 3 standard fighters and still make it back home. In January 1944, a new version of the P-47 started arriving in England, which would fully change its reputation from a joke to a terrifying presence. The P-47 D-22 was equipped with a Hamilton standard hydrostatic propeller featuring paddle blades that spanned 13 feet in diameter, with wide blades that sliced through the air like gigantic knives. The increase in climb speed was swift and significant. Previously, Thunderbolts had ascended at a meager 2,200 feet per minute at sea level, while the paddle blade models could reach 3,000 feet per minute, matching or even surpassing German fighters at various heights. The large propeller also enhanced acceleration, enabling P-47s to gain speed more rapidly in straight flight. Hedman Heinz Knoker of Jagdgeschwader 11, a pilot with more than 200 combat missions, encountered the new variants in February 1944 during a bomber intercept near Hanover. He noted in his combat journal, "The bulky American fighters have figured out how to climb. We ambushed a formation near Hanover, expecting to have our usual edge. They moved toward us and climbed alongside us. When we attempted to pull away, they followed us up to 30,000 feet. Schmitt was trapped and destroyed. Only smoke and debris remained. These are not the same aircraft we mocked last year." The paddle blade propeller did more than enhance capability. It altered the sound of the Thunderbolt. The unique booming roar produced by the tips of the blades reaching supersonic speeds could be heard from miles away. German ground forces reported being able to recognize incoming P-47s by sound alone. A deep ominous rumble signified impending doom from above. They began referring to it as Donnerschlag thunderclap. By March 1944, P-47s fitted with external fuel tanks became capable of escorting bombers deep into German territory. The typical setup had either two 108-gallon wing tanks or a 75-gallon belly tank, allowing a range of over 1,000 miles. Thanks to the paddle blade propeller, which enhanced performance even when fully loaded, Thunderbolts could engage effectively right after releasing their tanks. In response, the Luftwaffe aimed to focus on the bombers, hoping to cause enough casualties to hinder the American daytime operations. However, this meant they needed to fly through the P-47 escort screen, a task that was becoming increasingly dangerous. German pilots developed a reluctant respect that neared fear for the large American fighters. Major G.A. Rau, a prominent German ace with 275 kills, primarily on the Eastern Front, survived an encounter with P-47s on March 6, 1944, that left him severely injured. In a post-war interview he remembered, "We spotted them above us, large shapes against the sun. Someone joked, 'Here come the flying pigs.' But nobody was laughing half a minute later. They swooped down like a landslide, faster than we could respond. The first attack took out 3 of our fighters, instantly reduced to charred remains. Their cannons didn't fire in bursts like ours did. Instead, they unleashed continuous streams of fire. Getting caught in that stream meant certain death." Escort missions highlighted another advantage of the P-47, endurance. While German fighters operated at high power settings that quickly used up fuel, the large American radials could fly efficiently at high altitudes. Thunderbolts could stay with the bombers for hours, taking turns providing cover while still having enough fuel for both combat and returning home. As more P-51 Mustangs arrived in the spring of 1944 to assume long-range escort responsibilities, P-47 units began to focus more on ground attack, a role that would establish them as the most feared aircraft in the German fleet. The shift started seriously in April 1944 as the Allies geared up for the invasion of France. The Thunderbolt's heavy machine gun payload was just as efficient against ground targets. The standard armor-piercing incendiary rounds could breach the upper armor of most German vehicles, while the volume of fire could obliterate soft targets in seconds. A quick burst could deliver 160 half-inch projectiles to a target area the size of a truck. However, it was the addition of bombs and rockets that truly converted the P-47 into a versatile powerhouse. The D-25 version could carry 2 1,000-pound bombs under the wings and a 500-pound bomb under the fuselage, making for a bomb load comparable to early medium bombers. Later designs included rocket appendages for 10 5-inch high-velocity aircraft rockets, each comparable to a 105 mm artillery shell. Oberst Hans von Luck, who led the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment during the Normandy campaign, directly experienced P-47 ground assaults. They came in extremely low enough to see the faces of the pilots. The noise was horrifying. Engines blaring, rockets howling. Then came the pounding of those heavy machine guns. A fleet of our trucks suddenly vanished. 20 vehicles were turned into flaming ruins in one sweep. The mental impact on the soldiers was profound. They referred to them as Jabos, fighter bombers. Yet they were much more than that. They acted as airborne artillery with pinpoint precision. On June 6, 1944, the Luftwaffe realized just how drastically the power dynamics had changed. More than 500 P-47s offered air support to the invasion, forming an unbreakable shield over the shores. German planes that tried to approach the landing areas were decimated. Oberleutnant Wolfgang Fischer of Jagdgeschwader, one of only 3 German pilots to reach the beach that day, stated that the skies belonged to the Americans. Thunderbolts filled the air from the ocean to 30,000 feet, that we made an attempt to penetrate at dawn. 12 fighters from our squadron. I was the only one who came back. The P-47s were positioned at every altitude. You couldn't climb above them. Couldn't dive beneath them. Their firepower turned our planes into showers of aluminum. In the weeks after D-Day, P-47s relentlessly eliminated German movements during the day. The figures were astonishing that in June alone, the 9th Air Force Thunderbolts destroyed 651 locomotives, 3,847 trucks, 512 tanks and armored vehicles, and 4,553 horse-drawn vehicles. The Wehrmacht was compelled to operate only at night, severely limiting their ability to react to Allied progress. The Germans attempted various strategies to combat the Thunderbolt threat. They enhanced their vehicle armor, deployed additional anti-aircraft artillery, and created new camouflage techniques. None of it proved effective. The P-47's blend of speed, protection, and firepower made them almost invincible. Even the dreaded 88mm flak guns found it difficult to track the speedy fighters at low altitudes. While ravaging Europe, the P-47 was also showing its capabilities in the Pacific theater. The 348th Fighter Group, based in New Guinea, realized that the Thunderbolt's characteristics were ideal for the vast distances and tough conditions of the Pacific conflict. Colonel Neil Kirby, who led the 348th, formulated strategies tailored specifically for the Pacific environment. On October 11, 1943, Kirby took 4 P-47s against 40 Japanese planes over Wewak, shooting down 6 enemy aircraft himself in a single operation, which earned him the Medal of Honor. The Japanese, familiar with swift yet delicate American aircraft, were taken aback by the P-47's blend of offensive capacity and sturdiness. Japanese fighter ace Saburo Sakai, who faced P-47s during combat in New Guinea, later recalled, "We referred to them as monsters. Our 20mm cannon, which could easily take down a P-40 with a few shots, seemed ineffective. I fired many rounds at a Thunderbolt and saw it continue to soar. Their incoming fire was frightening. Streams of heavy bullets that ripped through planes." The P-47N, designed especially for the Pacific, had enhanced fuel capability with wet wings carrying 93 gallons each, allowing for a range of 2,350 miles. This version could escort B-29s to Japan, proving that the short-range fighters of 1943 had transformed into genuine long-distance weapons. Possibly, the most significant proof of the P-47's advancement came from its encounters with German jet fighters. The Messerschmitt Me-262, with its maximum speed of 540 miles per hour, should have been out of reach for propeller-driven planes. However, Thunderbolt pilots found they could overtake jets under 2 circumstances: during takeoff and landing when the jets were most exposed, and in high-speed dives from altitude. On November 27, 1944, Lieutenant Colonel John C. Meare of the 352nd Fighter Group became one of the first pilots to bring down an Me-262 using a P-47. Diving from an altitude of 28,000 feet, Meare's Thunderbolt achieved speeds nearing 500 miles per hour, fast enough to pursue the jet in level flight. The jet pilot, confident in his speed superiority, never detected the descending P-47 until Meare opened fire at 400 yards. Meare's report on the encounter stated, "The enemy plane broke apart under our fire. Large sections, including both engines, broke away from the fuselage. The pilot could not escape. The concentrated fire from our 850 caliber guns proved to be more effective than we expected against jet aircraft." By early 1945, specially designed P-47M variants were introduced specifically to face German jets and V-1 flying bombs. With water methanol injection increasing power to 2,800 horsepower and improved aerodynamics, these superior Thunderbolts were capable of achieving 470 miles per hour in level flight at 30,000 feet, sufficient to intercept jets in specific scenarios. Major George Bostwick, leading the 63rd Fighter Squadron with P-47s, down two Mi-262s in March 1945. His tactical report highlighted the importance of firepower over speed. The jets are quicker, but they lack maneuverability and are unable to endure damage. One solid shot from our guns and they fall apart like paper. They must reduce speed to attack bombers, which is when we can catch them. The ultimate showcase of American manufacturing strength occurred during Operation Boden Platter. The Luftwaffe's urgent effort to eliminate Allied air supremacy on January 1, 1945. Almost 900 German fighters, including their top remaining pilots, launched surprise strikes on Allied airfields throughout Belgium and the Netherlands. At Y-34 Airfield near Metz, home to the P-47s of the 365th Fighter Group, the attack was initially successful. German pilots eliminated 22 Thunderbolts on the ground along with numerous other planes. A German pilot who was captured and taken to the command center pointed toward the flaming aircraft and mockingly asked, "What do you think of that?" Major George Brooking's reply became well known throughout the 9th Air Force. He gestured to the area where ground crews were already moving damaged planes to clear space for replacements. "By tomorrow we will have 40 new ones. How long will it take for you to replace your pilots?" The smirk faded from the German pilot's face. Within 48 hours, brand new P-47 D-40s occupied the flight line. Shipped in from depots in England, the Luftwaffe lost 271 planes and 213 pilots in Boden Platter, including many vital instructors and squadron leaders. These losses could never be replenished. The Americans suffered a total loss of 134 planes across all targeted airfields, all of which were replaced within a week. The statistics illustrated the inevitable defeat. During the war, Republic Aviation manufactured 15,683 P-47s, more than any other U.S. fighter. At its peak, the Farmingdale facility on Long Island produced one Thunderbolt every hour, non-stop. By 1944, the Evansville factory in Indiana, which was built on previously unused farmland in 1942, was generating 500 aircraft each month. Each P-47D required 65,000 separate components, 8 miles of electrical wiring, 2,000 pounds of aluminum, and 300 pounds of rubber. The engine alone consisted of 2,400 unique parts crafted to tolerances of 1,000th of an inch. Nevertheless, American workers, many of whom were women with no prior experience of aircraft before Pearl Harbor, meticulously assembled these intricate machines with a level of precision that surpassed peacetime benchmarks. The production of ammunition was overwhelming. For every P-47 mission, 3,400 rounds of .50 caliber ammunition were needed, as hundreds of Thunderbolt planes carried out daily operations. By mid-1944, the usage of ammunition surpassed over 10 million rounds each month. The Lake City Arsenal in Missouri, among various ammunition factories, manufactured 30 million rounds each month. Every cartridge was crafted to precise tolerances of 10,000 of an inch, guaranteeing dependable feeding through the coordinated gun systems. The fuel requirements were tremendous. A Thunderbolt consumed 100 gallons of fuel in regular flight, and up to 300 gallons when engaged in combat with water injection active. By late 1944, just the 9th Air Force used over 25 million gallons of aviation fuel every month, all transported across the Atlantic Ocean in tankers made possible by American mass production. Notably impressive was the training of pilots, where by 1944, the United States was producing 30,000 pilots every year from advanced training, a number greater than the total trained by Germany throughout the entire war. Each P-47 pilot completed at least 400 hours of flight training before they saw combat, which included 100 hours in advanced fighter aircraft. In comparison, German pilots were going into battle with less than 100 hours of flying time by the end of the war. The difference in quality was apparent during combat. American pilots arrived in Europe skilled in formation flying, navigating instruments, gunnery, and tactics. They got experience flying against captured German planes, which helped them understand their adversaries' strengths and weaknesses. They were deeply familiar with their aircraft systems, having studied technical manuals that German pilots did not have access to. Lieutenant Eugene Roberts, who landed in England in September 1944, was a prime example of the advantage in American training. "I logged 420 hours of flying time, with 75 hours in the P-47 model. I had shot at towed targets, practiced deflection shooting, and analyzed gun camera footage from real missions. On my first mission, I knew precisely what to do, while the German pilot I confronted likely had less than half my experience. It was hardly a fair encounter. In March 1945, Oberstleutnant Priller, the very pilot who had ridiculed the P-47s as awkward creatures 2 years prior, was interviewed by German propaganda officials wanting to raise morale. His remarks, which were too demoralizing to publish, highlighted a significant change in German views. The Thunderbolt is the finest fighter bomber ever created. Its firepower is unmatched. The weapons do not jam, do not overheat, and have enough ammunition under standard combat conditions. It can carry bombs like a medium bomber, launch rockets like artillery, and engage like a fighter when necessary. However, more significant than the machine itself is what it symbolizes: boundless American production. They can lose 10 and construct 20 while we lose 1 and it's lost forever. Their pilots come better prepared than our trainers. They possess ample fuel for training, ammunition for practice, and spare parts for everything. We have only bravery. Yet, bravery without resources equates to simply postponing defeat. We mocked them in 1943, but now the laughter has faded. When those guns fire, you realize death has arrived. The sound haunts us. Mechanical, exact, relentless. Like everything from America, it centers on an overwhelming dominance in material resources. They did not conquer us through superior strategies or more courageous aviators. They overwhelmed us with a deluge of metal and ammunition. By April 1945, the Luftwaffe largely existed only in name. Lack of fuel left most planes grounded. Skilled pilots were either dead or imprisoned. Airstrips were devastated wastelands. Yet, even with available planes and fuel, German pilots confronted an impossible challenge. Attacking meant engaging with formations of P-47s that controlled every altitude from ground level to 40,000 feet. Feldwebel Klaus Brechner, one of the last pilots trained in 1945, completed only one combat mission before the conflict concluded. His encounter with P-47s over Leipzig lasted a mere 12 seconds. I witnessed them diving from above, for Thunderbolts flying in perfect alignment. I attempted to maneuver, but they were too swift. The lead aircraft fired from 500 meters away. My plane jolted as if struck by heavy hammers. The engine blew up and the wing detached. I barely managed to escape. In the parachute, I observed them take out my whole unit. 6 fighters eliminated in less than a minute. The sky was filled with melting metal and bodies. The unique sound of incoming Thunderbolts created fear among ground German forces aviators who realized that what medical personnel termed Jabo to find shelter right away. Physical signs of anxiety showing up when P-47 were detected nearby. Astonishing. Veterans in Europe faced 3,752 without German planes were taken down in dogfights against P-47s. Another 3,315 aircraft were destroyed while on the ground. 86,000 rail cars were eliminated. 9,000 locomotives were lost. 6,000 armored vehicles were destroyed. 68,000 trucks were wiped out. 60,000 horse-drawn vehicles were destroyed in the Pacific. In combat, 697 Japanese planes were shot down, 150 were destroyed on the ground, 1,500 vehicles were taken out, 150 locomotives were lost, and countless barges, ships, and facilities were affected. The 9th Air Force alone, mainly using P-47s, executed 213,873 combat missions, released 120,000 tons of bombs, discharged 135 million rounds of ammo, and fired 60,000 rockets. The Thunderbolt units recorded a 4.6:1 kill rate in aerial battles while boasting the least loss percentage of any Allied fighter bomber. Behind these figures, however, was the human toll. The Luftwaffe suffered around 28,000 pilots killed while engaging Western Allied forces. Many were shot down due to the intense fire from American heavy machine guns. Each loss was years of training that Germany could not regain. By the end of the war, the typical German fighter pilot had fewer than 30 hours of combat experience. In contrast, the average P-47 pilot had accumulated over 200 hours. At the Luftwaffe Interrogation Center located at Oberursel, captured Allied pilots underwent debriefing by German intelligence. The documents obtained in 1945 disclosed German evaluations of Allied planes. The report on the P-47 was updated regularly throughout the conflict, reflecting a complete shift in viewpoint. In April 1943, it was described as a large, clumsy fighter, inferior to German models in every performance aspect except for dive speed. Its machine gun armament was deemed inadequate against cannon-armed fighters, resulting in a minimal threat assessment. By December 1943, it was recognized for outstanding performance at high altitudes, remarkable structural integrity, and increasing firepower concerns. The pilots were improving their tactics. Assessment: significant threat above 25,000 feet. In June 1944, it was noted as a dominant fighter-bomber, superior to all German types above 20,000 feet, with devastating firepower against all targets, making it exceedingly difficult to shoot down. Assessment: critical threat at all altitudes. In March 1945, it was acknowledged as the best fighter-bomber of the war, with an unmatched combination of firepower, strength, and performance, with pilot quality deemed exceptional and not viable in direct combat. In 1985, during a gathering of German and American fighter pilots in Phoenix, Arizona, former foes came together in harmony. General Lieutenant Adolf Galland, who previously led the Luftwaffe's fighter division, was asked about the P-47. His response, captured on video, illustrated this complete change in perspective. He stated, "We made a grave error in 1943. We saw this large, heavy fighter and ridiculed it. We thought the Americans didn't grasp air combat. We believed they had created a bomber and labeled it as a fighter. In reality, we were the ones who misjudged. The Americans didn't attempt to create a European fighter. They created an American aircraft focused on manufacturing, firepower, and durability. They recognized that in a battle of attrition, the aircraft capable of enduring damage and inflicting heavy fire would emerge victorious." They were correct. When I first piloted a seized P-47 after the conflict, everything became clear to me. The power was astonishing. It ascended as if it were soaring upwards. The cockpit offered great comfort. The visibility was superb. The controls were accurate. It was an aircraft for pilots, fortified with armor. However, what truly amazed me was the realization that America produced more than 15,000 of these intricate machines while engaging in a two-ocean struggle. Each needed an engine more sophisticated than anything constructed in Germany. Yet they manufactured them faster than we could create basic fighter planes. That's when I understood we had no chance. Those cannons we nicknamed Roosevelt's piano due to the noise they made. Once you heard that sound, it remained with you forever. Many of my companions experienced it for the last time. The P-47 didn't merely overcome the Luftwaffe. Every part was excessively built, obliterated it. Overly powerful. The design of the P-47 ideally illustrated American industrial ideals. 40,000 pounds, raw force engineering, which was 3 times by that of the airplane's total loaded weight. The engine mounts could endure forces of 12 G. The control cables were duplicated throughout and included automatic backup systems. The ammunition feeding system was a remarkable feat of engineering. 8 distinct ammunition boxes, each containing 425 rounds, were powered by electric boost motors to avoid jamming during nimble maneuvers. The guns were heated electrically to prevent freezing at high altitudes. Each gun possessed its own recharging system and could be synchronized separately. The convergence settings could be modified from 150 to 400 yards, enabling pilots to adjust for their desired engagement distance. Following the war, some German veterans claimed that the P-47 prevailed due to numbers rather than excellence, stating that their fighters were technically superior, but overwhelmed by quantity. However, the combat records provide a different perspective. In battles where both sides were equally matched, P-47s consistently came out on top. The heavy machine gun armament, which was considered inferior to cannons, turned out to be more effective during actual engagements. Examining gun camera footage explained why cannon shells, although more destructive individually, needed exact aiming and were limited in ammunition, generally ranging from 120 to 200 rounds. The P-47's weapons created a spread of bullets that assured hits, even with imperfect aiming. At standard engagement distances, a 2-second burst could deliver at least 20 rounds into a fighter-sized target, ensuring its destruction. The ammunition was also of superior quality. The American .50 caliber armor-piercing incendiary rounds utilized a delayed fuse that ensured penetration before explosion. The incendiary material burned at 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, sufficient to ignite aluminum structures. German 20mm shells, although heavier, often detonated upon contact with surfaces, which resulted in impressive yet occasionally superficial damage. The P-47 Thunderbolt remains the heaviest single-engine piston fighter ever produced in large numbers. Weighing 10,000 pounds empty, it surpassed the gross weight of various twin-engine fighters. Its engine generated more power than entire formations of bombers from the previous conflict. The firepower it delivered was greater than that of a squad of infantry. Despite this, it was manufactured in thousands, piloted by young individuals just out of high school, and serviced under combat situations by mechanics who learned their skills in a matter of weeks. The shift in German sentiment from ridicule to fear took less than 2 years. Throughout that time frame, the flying milk bottle evolved into the most dreaded aircraft in the Luftwaffe's experience. Veterans who had encountered Spitfires, Hurricanes, and Soviet Yaks without hesitation spoke of P-47s in quiet tones long after the war ended. At the United States Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio, a restored P-47D is displayed alongside other iconic fighters. Its information plaque details specifications and battle achievements. However, the true narrative is conveyed through a small display case that contains spent .50 caliber bullets and a clip of gun camera footage, showing a Focke-Wulf 190 being destroyed by fire. Beneath the display is a quote from an unnamed German pilot retrieved from a 1945 interrogation report. "We chuckled when we initially encountered them. Large, unattractive American pilots who were unable to maneuver, ascend, or engage in battle. Our amusement faded when we understood they didn't require turning or climbing. They merely aimed their weapons at us, and we vanished. The laughter faded along with our friends." The P-47 Thunderbolt was mocked when it joined the conflict and concluded the war as a tool of destruction. During that time, 8 synchronized Browning machine guns changed the landscape of air warfare and overwhelmed the Luftwaffe with a torrent of bullets. German aviators had ridiculed the clumsy American aircraft in April 1943. By May 1945, there were no German aviators remaining to make jokes. The thunder had roared, and the skies were dominated by America.